The 2010s were one of the most important times for music and sounded unlike any other decade. That period was overflowing with great music, with some of the greatest albums ever created being released in that 10-year span. But it also gave us the most exciting time in hip-hop history, with new sounds being introduced left, right and centre. After much research, I'm here to tell you why that decade was so special. The 2000s gave birth to many legendary hip-hop albums, yet at the same time the genre began getting a bit stale. Bar a few artists, there was nobody really pushing the sound further. All of the innovation came during the decade after. The 2010s, rap music's renaissance period. During this time, the genre saw a burst of innovation coming from not only upcoming artists but already established ones too. The decade began with one of the most perfectly crafted albums ever in My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, which saw Kanye reach heights that we had never seen before, as he combined the greatest strengths of his previous albums into one singular project. And yet, just a few years later, he would return with an album contradicting everything he'd ever made. Yeezus could be seen as the epitome of the 2010s, a risky album that pushed every single boundary of rap music, but it wasn't the only album doing this. The early 2010s also bear witness to, potentially, Drake's greatest period. Whilst Take Care would not be considered innovative nowadays, and certainly not when compared to Yeezus, it was still a very fresh sound. Drake perfected the blend of hip-hop, R&B and pop with this album, which is a sound that you continue to hear to this day, and a sound that solidified Drake as one of the biggest artists of this decade. At the same time, you had the rise of artists like A$AP Rocky and Travis Scott, who once again were bringing a brand new, mesmerizing sound to hip-hop. The music these artists produced would set off a domino effect lasting the entirety of the decade, with the music becoming more and more experimental as the years went by. Each artist was influencing the next generation, then the newer generations influenced the old generations, and it was this cycle of inspiration that managed to make hip-hop so fresh and so popular in the 2010s. Hip-hop arguably reached peak creativity levels during the halfway period of the 2010s, which coincides with the iconic SoundCloud era of rap music. After Travis Scott released his debut album, Rodeo, in 2015, the popularity of trap music, specifically melodic trap, completely skyrocketed, sending hip-hop past a point it had never done before. It was no longer boom-bap beats and soulful samples. Instead, artists were utilizing auto-tune, 808s and hard-hitting bass, a shift in sound that can be felt even today. Artists would continue developing this melodic sound until hip-hop was more than just a genre. The amount of subsections that were created during this decade is second to none. You had alternative rap becoming mainstream through Odd Future and Tyler the Creator. You had emo rap originating in this decade through artists like Lil Peep, X and Juice WRLD. There was even a massive uprising in psychedelic hip-hop led by Chance the Rapper, Travis Scott and A$AP Rocky. And those are just a handful of the many genres that rap music combined with. And it was one thing in particular that caused this: SoundCloud. Or more generally, just the increase in music streaming as opposed to physical copies. No longer did artists have to put their music on CDs and graft to gain some sales. They could simply post their music online, which allowed the entire world to hear their creations and gain the possibility for unlimited growth. In fact, streaming platforms forever changed the music industry, as it became easier than ever for an upcoming artist to get their music heard. All they needed was a microphone and somewhere quiet to record. Post a snippet on social media and your life could change forever. Even superstar artists like XXXTentacion and Ski Master Slump God began their careers using a Blue Snowball microphone to record. Streaming platforms allowed artists to become inspired from music all over the world, leading to fusions with rock, pop, and numerous other genres. Artists were also no longer confined to the sound of their area code, meaning you had LA-based artists being influenced by the likes of Young Thug, New York-based artists being influenced by the South. Hip-hop had become a completely fluid and unrestricted genre. But influence wasn't the only thing to come from streaming. The ability to take in more music allowed for more artists from different genres to make songs with each other. One of the most popular tracks of 2017 included Calvin Harris producing a song with Frank Ocean, The Migos, and Future, allowing the R&B and rap artists to shine on funk and dance-style production. All of this growth led to rap music surpassing rock and officially becoming the most popular genre as of 2018. At one point in time, 8 out of the 10 most popular artists in the world belonged to hip-hop, with Drake, Kendrick, and Future leading the charge. And that star power is something that separates the 2010s from other decades. Never before had the world witnessed so many stars at the same time. There was an endless list of emerging hip-hop stars that is impossible to summarize without boring you. Yet each of them, for the most part, managed to sound unique and had their own sound. And if you compare that to the current decade, you'll find that there is much less new stars being born and a lot more clones of existing artists. Now, I'm not saying there has been none, just significantly less. Is there an overabundance of rap music? Have people grown tired of the sound? Both questions being raised that simply weren't a problem in the 2010s, as that decade was the most original and innovative time in hip-hop. You can still find originality mostly within the underground scene, but as for the mainstream, there is only a handful of artists releasing music that still sounds fresh. If you look at the mainstream albums released last decade, every single artist seemed to be in their prime. Frank Ocean was actually dropping and had created one of the greatest albums in the history of music. Kendrick Lamar went on a 3-album run that many people consider to be the best of all time. Drake perfected his sound and gave us several albums that took over each summer. Chance the Rapper was actually good. Not to mention, Playboi Carti dropped 3 generational albums and then just disappeared from the public eye. Everywhere you looked, you'll find another classic album that came from the 2010s. Now, it'd be impossible for me to detail every great album, especially if you delve outside of the realms of hip-hop. Apart from rock, which saw a big decline, other genres were also thriving. Pop music, through albums like Rihanna's Anti, dominated alongside rap music throughout the entirety of the decade. Then you had masterpieces like Blonde, an album that so many people hold close to their hearts. Every listen brings you a feeling of nostalgia like no other, reminding you that no one is doing it like Frank Ocean. It's possible that we might never see a decade like the 2010s again. That 10-year period was quite simply an easier time for most people, and you'll look back at it fondly, which makes the music sound better. And whilst innovation and originality was the main trend in music back then, recently it has been the opposite. The emergence of AI has been a serious problem within the industry, with major artists like Kanye utilising the tool. Music created by AI is completely devoid of any life. The soul that goes into creating the art is non-existent, and yet it's hugely likely that more and more artists will succumb to it, which means that the future may never reach the heights that we saw in the 2010s.